Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Today, we will look at one more aspect of sentence for us to see the underlying pattern of the formation of sentences. We are looking at underlying patterns that come out and that are helpful in understanding of making a sentence. What are the parts of sentences and processes involved in it? In a particular thing, we want to look at movement. I'll explain this to you, what we mean by movement. So some of the questions that we want to raise are, what is movement? What is the evidence that movement takes place in natural languages? And what are motivations for movement? We'll try to answer these questions in a short period of time. So we begin with, what is movement? We often find that some elements get displaced from one position to the other. And again, for us to see this point, the understanding of phrase structure will be of our understanding of phrase structure will help us understand the notion of displacement or movement in natural languages. And we can demonstrate this phenomena of movement in a particular way, in a nice way, for us to understand the underlying pattern. So an element in one place moves to another is the fundamental definition of movement. And what are such elements and what are the positions? So, for example, look at this sentence once again. John likes pizza in the evening. Let's take an example. Let's take an example of an interrogative sentence. And we can have a sentence like, we are leaving the part of the adjunct for the purpose of simplicity for us to understand displacement. We have a sentence, affirmative sentence. What does John? We have a sentence, John likes pizza. All right? We have an affirmative sentence, John likes pizza. How it is represented, you can see that on the screen, and you have seen that several times before in the phrase structure. Now, I want to draw your attention to the interrogative counterpart of this sentence, and we want to see the relationship between the two, which will help us understand displacement finally. We are looking at the interrogative counterpart of the sentence that you see on the screen. What do we find in this thing is the object of the sentence, which was pizza in the other case, has been questioned. And we are saying, what does John like? What does John like? The sentence was John likes pizza. Now we are questioning pizza, and the sentence is, what does John like? How do we understand this sentence, and how do we represent this sentence in the phrase structure, and such a representation is going to help us understand the displacement of some elements in a sentence. So how do we represent this sentence? Please keep in mind that this was our IP. And when we have this, it's certainly beyond IP. So how does this work? Where does this go in the structure that we have seen so far? The structure of IPs does not help us explain this sentence, because we see some of the elements outside IP. So this is how it works. So let me do this thing first, and then I'll explain this to you. We introduce the notion of another phrase which is called complementizer, and we call it as CP. If you look at the pattern of this phrase, it is maintaining the integrity of, it is maintaining similarity in terms of all other phrases that you have seen. It will have an specifier, it is going to have a head, and it's going to have a complement. So the IP becomes the complement of C. Then we have the whole sentence that you have on the screen, where you have John here, and then we have B bar specifier, and we have V and NP here. This is the verb like. And this was an inflection which has tense in it, so this is going to be present tense. That's not an important part right now. What we want to see, that this is a transitive verb, it has an object, and this object is not available here. Therefore, we can say that this object NP has been questioned. And we see that this has moved out of its place and it has gone to some other place. And because it is not there in this structure, it is not available under IP. In the IP, in this sentence, we only have John likes. As a matter of fact, it's not even John likes, it is John like. So this verb, this one, rather this IP, is also stripped out of its tense. So in the bigger sentence, what does John like? The IP does not even contain its tense. It has also moved to some other place. And we see that it has moved, tense has moved here, and the NP that questions the object is what, which is here. Both of them are outside IP. And therefore, we have introduced the notion of CP to show that the displaced elements have moved to a different position, which is certainly beyond IP. So what we say first is this tense has moved to this place, and therefore we get something like does. Because tense occurs in a head position, so it has moved again to another head position, which is C. Okay? Then we see that tense is an abstract category in a sentence. In a normal declarative sentence of present tense, verbs host them. So we have a sentence, John likes pizza. The verb like hosts tense. Being abstract, they do not get represented on their own. They need a lexical item for their manifestations. When this gets stripped out of this IP, it needs something to host it. And to cut the long story short, it comes in form of the element do comes to host it, and then we find it in the C position, which is another head. And this NP gets to another position which can host another NP, which is in turn the specifier of the CP. See, this NP is represented here, and this thing comes here. So we have identified the elements that appear to have moved out of their original positions. At the same time, we have found the places where they could have possibly moved. Finding the elements that has moved was easy. Finding the place where they could have moved was little bit difficult, because knowing the fact that these elements have moved out of IP, we needed to create more positions to capture this phenomena of movement outside its domain, outside the domain of a sentence. And then we say that an interrogative sentence is bigger than an IP. It's a CP where the whole IP is the complement of another C, and then this notion gets captured. What's the motivation for this movement? The motivation for the movement is language internal. In English, all the interrogative sentences demonstrate displacement. This is called NP movement or WH movement, where this NP, when questioned, comes in the form of a question word, and this is how it gets represented. So the motivation is language internal, and the places are outside IP, and we clearly see an example of displacement. Now, please know that this displacement takes place as part of the structure of sentence, and this displacement is a pattern, and this displacement happens at a conceptual level, which is also known as mental representation. Now, human mind has a way to figure out this movement and represent this movement in order to understand the sentence. Thus, now we know the notion of movement, we know the motivation underlying this movement, and the places to which these things could have potentially moved. All English questions require displacement. In some cases, it might only have displacement of an inflectional category tense. So, for example, if we have a yes-no type of a question, and where we say questions like, did you eat? We are only displacing the tense, which is an inflectional item. In the WH type of question, which is also called content type of question, we have displacement of the whole NP, and thus we see one more pattern underlying the structure of sentence. Thank you.